So I'd like to say Sir George is in the house.
Isabella Rockstar, no. Special envoy for HIV is no. I stopped doing that almost a year ago. First of all, I think everyone is in agreement. This was a marvelous evening, and we should all be grateful to the people who thought about it and the people who put it on. Congratulations to everyone. As Sandeep said, when I made some closing remarks at the interactive session for the UN a couple of months ago, I used 4 words which have special resonance in my country when I encouraged the group to agitate, educate, integrate, and communicate. And I was so pleased to see some of them finding echo, getting traction in the work that this group is doing. As I sat there and listened, I reflected on a meeting I had many years ago with President Aristide of Haiti. And I said to him, I quoted him the beginning of the words from a very famous Spanish song, Guantanamera. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crecen las palmas. And I went on to say, pero soy un hombre sincero, que viene de donde sonaban los tambores. Guantanamera says, I'm a sincere man that comes from the land where the palm trees grow. But I am a person who comes from the land where the drums did beat. I make that point because the beating of the drums and the communication between people is a fundamental aspect of human being. All human beings wish to communicate. The technology may differ. The technology is more sophisticated, but it's an intrinsic need for human beings to communicate one with another. And it is to many of us in health to make that basic wish to communicate something that turns out to be for the common good. I'd like to thank the sponsors, the HCC, Trevor, and Chris, you must mention the whole Hassel family is here. Not only Trevor, but his wife Lucinda is here, and your girlfriend as well, which is an important consideration. Many of these things will not happen unless there's involvement of everyone, families, individuals, all together. So I was also very pleased to see that. See PAHO involved, and I know James left a very important meeting up in Harlem to be with us, and thank you very much, James, for coming. And of course, the Global Health Council and the Young Professionals Network, NCD Net. I'd just like to make 6 points very briefly. One, I'd like to congratulate the speakers, not only the content, but the enthusiasm, the energy, the passion with which they spoke. I've always said, quoted the German philosopher Hegel, nothing happens in this world without passion. Nothing happens without passion. And I was stimulated by the passion with which he spoke. But there was another thing that came home to me. When I was director of PAHO, there are 2 words I expunged from any text. Sedebe, mean one ought to. It's not the ought to. All of them said we will, we can, we shall. And I would like that to be the spirit when we move forward in terms of this. Not sedebe, one ought to, or there is a need for. No, it is a great to hear young people say we will, we shall, we can. And that is the spirit I'd like to congratulate you all for, in addition to the passion. And when I see one of the medical graduates of my school speaking with such enthusiasm and such passion, it does me good to hear you. The second point I'd like to make is this, and James referred to it. Lyman Digicel collaborated with the civil society organization. That is a marvelous thing. And I become more and more concerned when there's the idea that the private sector cannot contribute to the public good. And to see the private sector, competitors coming together to work with a civil society organization is a marvelous thing. And I hope that one of the things that will come out of many discussions that take place in the next coming days is the recognition that, in fact, of the fundamental role that the private sector has to play. No sector is perfect. None is perfect. The civil society organization is not perfect. Government is not perfect. The private sector is not perfect. But unless they come together and work together in this area, we're all up the creek. Now, the third point I'd like to make is the issue of branding. I agree entirely. I remember which one of you said it, but it's so important to get Chris pointed out, to get a brand. And you have the cross, red ribbon, and the yellow, what it is. And I would encourage those who think about it, I hadn't thought about it before in terms of a physical symbol, to really think seriously with some physical symbol that can brand. I was so pleased to hear you all speak of NCDs and not necessarily go through the litany every time of their non-communicable diseases, cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Speak of the NCDs as a brand that gets traction. That's why Kentucky Fried Chicken changed its name to KFC. A simple three consonants that would resonate. Everyone knew what it was. Everyone knew what it was. So I'd like to congratulate you all on this. The third point I would make is it was emphasized that it's not only the form, but it is the content that is important, and it is also what the public wishes to hear. Almost the divine, almost what, in fact, the public wishes to hear. Chris points out that there was the pushback, and that we didn't want that, we didn't want that. And you had to get to some idea of what they wished to hear. So it's not only what you are offering all that is important, but what your audience wishes, and every good marketer knows that. I was talking about the whole idea of social media and social communication. My son Adrian, who works in this area, and the whole idea of what is cool came up. And he told me a story of an engineer who was walking along, and the engineer came on a frog. And the frog looked at the engineer and said, "You know, I will give you as many beautiful women as you want, as much money as you want, and as many Lamborghinis as you want, if you just kiss me." So the engineer stooped and put the frog in his pocket and walked on. And after a minute, the frog said, "But don't you want beautiful women? Don't you want fast cars? Don't you want much money?" And he said, "No, but having a talking frog is cool." The penultimate point I want to make is this. All of you, intentionally or not intentionally, spoke about how did you create a social movement. What are the ingredients for creating a social movement? Some of us have thought about this for a long time. Trevor and I have spoken about this at length. How do you create a social movement? And I'll just cite briefly one example that I read a bit about. When the movement for civil rights in this country was at its hottest, before President Johnson intervened appropriately, much of the history of this turns not only for what Rosa Parks did, but turns around as to what were the ingredients for generating the local social consciousness. And there's an interesting book written about this, and the author, Doug McAdam, points out about the three things that were fundamental for doing this. One was the black church, two were the black universities, and three was the Southern NAACP. And I've often thought about the first two as places where people could communicate, where people could come together, where people could exchange. And the idea of having people come together, connected together, is probably one of the most potent ways of creating a social movement. And what you are supplying by the technology are the instruments to facilitate this communication between people of like mind, to create the social movement. I like the person who said that Arab Spring was not created by Twitter, but in fact that the social movement was facilitated by the presence of Twitter. And I like to think that the possibility of creating this social movement through communication, especially communication by the young, is a very potent one indeed. The other thing that came across to me that was really impacting was the idea, which I've observed in my grandchildren more than my children, is they're not really interested in joining an organization, but my children too, but more interested in a cause. I remember my last son, when he was at school, he came home to me and said they organized a set of concerts at that time, Rock Against Apartheid. And he had a great concern to whether he should take money from a particular company and had investment in South Africa. But the point was that they were interested in the cause, the causes that represented the correction of injustices that should not occur. So it is this idea of creating a social movement strengthened by communication that involves the youth, who are more and more, as you said, both of you, are more involved in let us build a better world. And sometimes we, throw up our arms about the youth. I teach at Hopkins, and I can tell you, when you speak to some of the young students there, it does your heart good, because you see lots of young people who really want to see this world a better place. They genuinely want to see this world a better place. Last point I'd make is this. Of course, this is ambitious. Of course, what you all are trying to do is ambitious. Of course, change is ambitious. But none of us would wish to accept the immutability of human behavior. None of us would like to accept that. Some of you will say, of course, it is utopia to think of human behavior being mutable. But I always remind you what Oscar Wilde said. Oscar Wilde said, any map of the world that doesn't have utopia on it is not worth looking at. Thank you very much.